Okay, we are at the home stretch. Coming to the end of the tractate. We discussed already which tractate we're going to do next, isn't that correct?
I think we were talking about
Saita? Rosh Hashanah, what did we conclude? Do you remember?
We didn't conclude anything. You left it open, you gave us
So what are the options in the table? We've always done here in the past, either related to halacha in some way, some practical law, like we learned about tefillin, mezuzah, or we learned midrashic gemaras that relate to lessons in life that have a spiritual kind of component to it, like we did with Sanhedrin, talking about Mashiach's coming and history and all kinds of lessons we learned. And the tract that we did here, Yoma, had a bit of both. It had halacha of Yom Kippur, and also had spiritual message related to tshuva. We also had a whole section on the mana, which had like spiritual component to it. So in that vein, it's kind of I think we continue going. Unless you want to go, what's the word? Not paralegal, like getting into deep legal issues about property damages. We can go that route also. But I think I like to focus continuing on either the spiritual element or the practical halacha or some combination of both. Yeah? So what are the options at the table for that? There's Rosh Hashanah, which has again both the practical element, laws of Rosh Hashanah, and there's also a bit of spirituality there also. There's Sukkah. Sukkah is practical. There's one section that's a lot of math in Sukkah, about the geometry of the Sukkah, the shape of the Sukkah, and how to figure out what size it is and what size it can be. Yeah. Then there is Saita, where there is some legal part. The legal part's not practical, at least not in the simple sense, because it's not practiced today. The law of the Saita is the law of a husband who's jealous of his wife and warns her against being with a certain man. So there is the way of understanding it in the spiritual sense. It's a metaphor for the relationship between God and the Jew. And Saita itself has lots of spiritual components to the Gemara too. So that's another option. And I think I'm leaning in that direction. Moed Katan also has both. It's practical because it's laws of Chol HaMoed, has laws of death and mourning. That's right, and it also has some spiritual components, a little less than Saita, and less than the others. But it's definitely got quite a bit of practical stuff, including the laws of mourning. Yeah, but it's not complete because most of the laws of mourning are in Masechet Avelos. You have some of the laws of mourning, but not all of them. It's not like, you won't get the full picture of the laws of mourning, but you get a lot on Chol HaMoed, the laws of the interim days between Sukkot and Simchat Torah, and between the first days of Pesach and last days of Pesach. So
do you want to combine both, Rabbi?
Yeah,
I'd like to combine both.
Yeah, we'd like to have, like we had here, which is both. We were weaving between the practical halacha and the spiritual component. So if we can get somehow.
So I'm saying, what I'm saying, Rabbi, is do you want to combine both tractates, that we study one, the sections that you would want from one and the sections that you would want from the other, to ensure that we would have the complete picture that you give us? Yeah,
so it's a nice idea. In other words, here, Yoma, we didn't do the whole tractate, we just did the last chapter. So maybe we could pick certain chapters of these tractates. Okay, I think that's a good idea.
Just the extras that you would want for that which you would like to bring out.
Right. So maybe if that's the case, we'll do the last tractate of Saita. Go back to, because we learned about the coming of Mashiach and Sanhedrin. The last tractate in Saita also has lots about the Mashiach's coming. So maybe we'll do that. It's not a long tractate. It's not a long chapter. It'll take us a few weeks. Maybe we'll do that. We'll start with the last tractate of Saita. Thank you, Judge. Good idea. And then we'll go back to some halacha tractate. We'll find maybe a tractate in one tractate within Moed Katan that focuses on the laws of Chol HaMoed, maybe. Alan agrees. Or another option is we could learn now, starting now. I don't know when we'll finish it, but we can do the section in the Gemara and Shabbos that deals with Hanukkah. That tractate, that section of the Gemara, which has both practical halacha and also gets into the story of Hanukkah. Maybe we should do that, and then we'll get to Saita. Okay, good idea. Done. So when we're done here, we're going to go to that section of Shabbos dealing with Hanukkah. It's not a full chapter. It's only a few pages. It's not very long. Maybe it'll take us. Hopefully, we'll finish it before Hanukkah or during Hanukkah. Maybe. Probably during Hanukkah. So a week and a half till Hanukkah, and then. Yeah.
Whatever you want to take, Rabbi.
Okay.
Whatever you want to take, please.
That's the route we're going to go. Thank you.
We want to enjoy the journey together with you that you want to take.
So I'm inviting you on it. I don't want to.
Thank you.
Collaboratively make a decision. So okay, so we're going to do that. That's a good idea. We're going to start with that section of the Gemara dealing with Hanukkah, and then maybe after that we'll look at the last tractate in Saita. Okay, so let's go to our Gemara here. Yoma Peches Amud Aleph, 88a, last section. I don't know if we'll finish it all today. Maybe we'll finish it tomorrow. Okay, so what we're dealing with here is a discussion about the Ne'ilah prayer and whether it's done on Yom Kippur before the day is over or after Yom Kippur once the day is out. And we said yesterday, confirmed yesterday, that it's a Tanaic dispute. No, I think the right word to say is Tatanaic. Tanataic, has the right way to say it? Tanaic is the right way? Okay. And between Rabbi Yossi and the sages, as to whether or not Ne'ilah is done during or after. And there's different, besides for that question about Ne'ilah being done on Yom Kippur versus after Yom Kippur, there are other applications in which that same dispute plays out. A, if Ne'ilah can be done after Yom Kippur is over, then it could cover your Ma'ariv, your evening service, because you've already prayed after Ma'ariv is over, you've already prayed in the evening. So Ne'ilah can cover Ma'ariv, that's number one. Whereas if Ne'ilah is during the day of Yom Kippur, then you have to do Ma'ariv later, if it's an obligatory, considering it's obligatory, or even today where we've accepted it as obligatory, even though it began as optional, even though Ma'ariv initially was an optional prayer, but today it's become obligatory, so your Ne'ilah can't cover it because Ne'ilah is done before Yom Kippur, if you're of that view. Whereas if you're of the view that Ne'ilah is done after Yom Kippur is over, then that can be in lieu of your Ma'ariv, of your evening prayer. That's number one. And number two, we were introduced to yesterday, which is, if someone has to go to Mikvah, because there was a seminal emission, and the only reason why we go to Mikvah on a seminal emission, notwithstanding the fact that Yom Kippur one is not allowed to bathe or wash, and he's only allowed to go to Mikvah if there is some sort of halachic obligation for him to go to Mikvah, in which case his Mikvah is not for his pleasure, but for the sake of the mitzvah, then someone who's had a seminal emission, his Mikvah is only justified if he has a prayer to do. If he still has a prayer to pray today, then he can go to Mikvah. If there's no prayers left to pray, then what's the point of going to Mikvah? We go after Yom Kippur's over. And therefore, if you're of the view that Ne'ilah is to be done on Yom Kippur, then even after Mincha, if there's a seminal emission, one still goes to Mikvah so he can daven Ne'ilah. But if Ne'ilah is after Yom Kippur, then after Mincha, no reason to go to Mikvah, because you're not praying anyway until Yom Kippur's over. Wait till Yom Kippur's done, then go to Mikvah, and then do your Ne'ilah. So it's the other application of the same dispute, whether Ne'ilah is during Yom Kippur or after Yom Kippur. And then, let's just get this straight, because this is important to know who said what for the next text. So, Rabbi Yossi was the one who said that Ne'ilah is done on Yom Kippur, and therefore, no matter when you've seen the seminal emission on Yom Kippur, one can go to Mikvah, because there's always another prayer to do, ending with the Ne'ilah prayer. Whereas the sages said, no, Ne'ilah is done after Yom Kippur is over, and therefore once Mincha is hit, no reason to go to Mikvah anymore. Once Mincha is done, no reason to go to Mikvah anymore, wait till after Yom Kippur. So Rabbi Yossi, Ne'ilah on Yom Kippur, sages, Ne'ilah after Yom Kippur. And that is set up for the contradiction we're about to read, in which the opinions seem to be the reverse. So Varaminu, the Gemara raises the following objection. This is a dispute. Whenever a challenge or question is introduced with this phrasing, Rami or Raminu, which is like a plural of that, it's always a question raised on two sources that are of equal standing that contradict each other. So it's a Mishnaic text and another Mishnaic text. And this Mishnaic text reads, Hazav, Va'azavav, Amitzayra, Matzayras, Ubayol Nida. B'timei Meis. Anybody with any form of impurity that requires mikvah. He lists all of them. Zav and Zava are also emissions, fluid emissions of that organ, both one for man, one for woman, but it's not exactly a menstruation, and it's not exactly a seminal emission. It's another kind of emission, which has its own set of laws. And then, sorry? Zav, that's right, Zav and Zava, it's correct. That's the name, that's the first two, and that's male and female. And then Mitzayda, Mitzaydas are the spiritual leprosy, the one who has the white splotches and therefore has to leave the camp and has to do all the whole process. And he also at one point has to go to Mikvah, again, male and female, Mitzayda, Mitzaydas. And then Boil Nida, this is an interesting one. This is one who had relations with a woman who had menstruated but didn't go to Mikvah. Imagine that. A Jew on Yom Kippur is cohabitates with a woman who hasn't gone to mikvah on Yom Kippur. And then he says, oh my gosh, I have to go to mikvah so I can atone on Yom Kippur. It just gives you the extremes of what the Gemara assumes a Jew is capable of. You got the godly soul that's willing to go to mikvah on Yom Kippur so he can properly think, and you have the animal soul, which is going to do the worst thing even on Yom Kippur. And they're both existing.
What happens to a woman if she's got a vaginal infection? And most vaginal infections can be discharged.
Yeah, so it's a good question, and depends on what type. But ordinarily, if there's an infection, then unless it's her expected menstruation, we don't usually count that as a impurity, because impurity is only with psichas harachem, which means only if the discharge is from the opening of not the birthing canal, but the other canal. What's the other canal called? I'm not sure. I don't know the biology, but I only know it from halacha. But there's another canal from which the menstruated discharge happens, and unless it comes from there, it doesn't make her impure. So if there's an infection, then we would discard any discharges that happen as far as the halacha is concerned. It's not so cut and dry. Ask your local Orthodox rabbi if you run into such an issue. But that's usually the case. Okay, so and then finally a tamei meis, a person who is come in contact with a dead body and also has to go to mikvah. So all of these people, says this Mishnaic H text, Toivlin kedarkam b'Yom Kippur. And the seventh day is on Yom Kippur. Oh, so he didn't cohabitate with the woman that day. He cohabitated earlier. Still pretty bad. Between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, he's with a nida. That's right. And he still did tshuva. That's right. And he wants to Yom Kippur, and he wants to go mikvah on Yom Kippur. You're right. It's 7 days earlier. You're right. 7 days later. Sorry. It could also be by mistake as well. Yeah. And then find out only afterwards that it was a menstruated. Yeah, it could also. That's true. It could also happen afterwards, where after they cohabitate, they see there's a sighting. That's true. Good point. Thank you. And then, so Toivlin Kedarkon, Yom Kippurim, all of these people are required to go to mikvah at nighttime, and therefore they would go to mikvah the night of Yom Kippur, after Kol Nidre. Or sometime then. Sorry? No, Toivlin Kedarkon, B'Leil Yom Kippur. Oh no, sorry, I skipped the line. Toivlin Kedarkon Yom Kippur, they go to mikvah during the daytime, and they go on Yom Kippur. I skipped the line. Nida V'Yoldes, a woman who gave birth, or a woman who had her menstruation, and now it's time for mikvah, this is only at night. They can go to mikvah the night before Yom Kippur. The night of Yom Kippur, after Kol Nidre, no problem. Baal Keri, here's the main point. Baal Keri, one who's had a seminal emission. So again, by the institution of Ezra, which again has been rescinded since then, but the institution of Ezra is that a person cannot pray before he's gone to mikvah after a seminal emission, and therefore this opinion is you can go to mikvah all day long. Which means, when is Ne'ilah prayed? On Yom Kippur. Before Yom Kippur is over, on Yom Kippur, which is why I can go to mikvah all day long. And this is the opinion of the sages, which the opinion of the sages said earlier, exact reverse. And here Rabbi Yossi says, that once the person's prayed David Mincha, there's no reason to go to mikvah. Which means, in Rabbi Yossi's view, there's no more prayers to come after Mincha. Wait till after Yom Kippur is over.
Also the reverse.
Which is exactly the reverse. So, in the first Mishnah, the opinion was, Rabbi Yossi says, Ne'ilah is done after Yom Kippur, and therefore mikvah for the one who's seen a seminal emission all day. Sages said, the first Mishnah, yesterday's Mishnah, and the sages said, once you daven mincha, no reason to go to mikvah anymore. And today it's the reverse. Sages said, all day you can go to mikvah because Ne'ilah comes after, and Rabbi Yossi says, once you daven mincha, no more mikvah, because there's no more prayers, because Ne'ilah's after, so exactly the reverse of yesterday's opinions. Two different opinions? They're both the reverse. Yeah? Sorry? That's correct. Says the Gemara, Lakasha, no contradiction. Hadat Tzali, Tfilas Ne'ilah, Hadloit Tzali. Here, first the Gemara addresses Rabbi Yossi, the contradiction. And then by answering Rabbi Yossi's contradiction, it's going to further compound the problem on the sages as follows. So here's the suggested answer for Rabbi Yossi. That the question is, did you daven Elor yet? So when Rabbi Yossi says you're allowed to go to mikvah all day, is because you haven't davened Elor yet. Elor is all the way at the end, the last thing you're going to do, just before the over, and therefore you can still go to mikvah. But in today's Mishnah, where he said, once you prayed mincha, you can't go to mikvah, it's talking about someone who did mincha, ne'ilah, and then seminal emission, even though Yom Kippur is not over yet. Which means, today's Mishnah is talking about someone who already did ne'ilah. And yesterday's Mishnah is talking about someone who didn't do ne'ilah. And therefore, it says the Gemara, if so, if you already daven ne'ilah, my time of the Rabbanon. Why would yesterday's sages say you can go to mikvah all day long? If you did ne'ilah already, why are you going to the mikvah? Following? In other words, if you're going to save Rabbi Yossi by saying that when you did, in other words, the dispute of yesterday is when you did ne'ilah. And if because you did ne'ilah, therefore, no going to mikvah, well then why would the sage say you should go to mikvah if you did ne'ilah already? I said that today's Mishnah, I'm sorry. If today's Mishnah is you prayed, if today's Mishnah is where you already prayed ne'ilah, and that's why Rabbi Yossi says don't go to mikvah anymore because there's no more prayers today, then why would the sage say you're allowed to go to mikvah? Wait till after Yom Kippur is over. Clear question? Clear? Sorry? Okay, so the problem is, if the argument was whether or not you pray ne'ilah during the day or at night, right, then they have to be consistent in both cases, right? But if we're saying it's not the dispute is just a question of whether you should go to mikveh today or not, and their scenarios are the same, otherwise, then you have to substantiate both views. So if the scenario is they're both agreeing that the case, no, they can't be arguing about cross cases. They have to be arguing about the same case. So if the case is they daven ne'ilah already, and Rabbi Yossi therefore saying don't go to mikveh anymore, then why would they say just say go to mikveh? You couldn't say it simply the argument is ne'ilah is later in the day, because that would be the same thing as yesterday's argument, in which case Rabbi Yossi is saying something wrong also. Because Rabbi Yossi is only saying don't go to mikveh because you've already daven ne'ilah. So either way you're stuck. Right? So the Gemara says, my time with the Rabbanon, what's the reason of the sages? If in today's Mishnah, the person already davened ne'ilah, and if there's no more reason to go to mikvah, which is why Rabbi says no mikvah, because there's no more prayer to follow, the only reason to go to mikvah is so that you can pray properly, then the question becomes, why do the sages say you should go to mikvah even though you've already prayed everything for that day? Why not wait till after Ma'ariv? Till after Yom Kippur is over, and then to mikvah and then Ma'ariv. Says the Gemara, Kasavri Rabbanan, the sages are of the view, Tefillah bizmana mitzvah. It is a mitzvah to go to the mikvah in its due time or earliest opportunity. Just because. And therefore, because you've discovered a seminal mission, even though you have no more prayers left for today, go to mikvah as soon as possible. That itself is a mitzvah. Let's explain this a little further. The reason why you're allowed to go to mikvah when a person has a prayer to follow is because, even though the Torah says you're not allowed to wash on Yom Kippur, is because, as we learned way earlier when we began Yoma in the summer, we learned that the prohibition of washing in Yom Kippur is limited to pleasurable washing. But if the washing has medicinal purposes, for example, or the washing has mitzvah purposes, as the case of the mikvah, you're allowed to go. And so long as there is a mitzvah element to your going to mikvah, you're allowed to go to the mikvah. And therefore, if you're of the view like the sages are saying, that the very fact that you're going to the mikvah on time is a mitzvah, then the fact that there's no prayer to follow doesn't matter, because you're already doing a mitzvah now by going to mikvah on time. So even though ne'ilah has been prayed, right? Sorry? The earliest possible opportunity. So because you've discovered a seminal mission, this person has discovered a seminal mission, therefore he's allowed to go to mikvah right away. Even though there's no prayer to follow, not today, there's a prayer coming in Ma'ariv. But nonetheless, going to mikvah as early as possible is of a mitzvah itself, and therefore you may and should do so. That's the sage's view. Clear? Okay.
When I'm in shul on Yom Kippur, the last thing I want to do is concentrate on English. You're concentrating
Yes.
on one thing,
The Gemara is going to make a very, very harsh statement soon about somebody who sees the seminal Mishnah on Yom Kippur. But just to understand, the Mishnah says in Avos, listing the miracles that happened in the temple, one of the miracles is that the high priest never saw a seminal emission. Which means the Mishnah expects that even the high priest in the temple on the holiest day of the year could have a seminal emission. And by miracle he doesn't. That's how far the sages understood human nature. That it could happen in the hundreds of years, literally hundreds, right? A total of something 810. More, because you're going back to the Shiloh. So in 1,000 years or so, maybe more, 1,500 years, between the Mishkan and the two Beis HaMikdash, or was that miracle limited to the first Beis HaMikdash? No, I think it's both. I'm not mistaken. I don't remember. Either way, it's hundreds of years for sure, centuries of high priests in the temple on Yom Kippur, and not all of them were such great people, by the way. Just as a matter of fact, not all of them were so great. And yet, sorry? It's happened. Yeah, and yet, no seminal emission. Which means the Gemara is expecting that it would happen, if not for a miracle. But nonetheless, as we're going to learn at the closing of this chapter, the Gemara has some very harsh statements about someone who sees a seminal emission on Yom Kippur. And what and
It's not even the last thing I would feel. It's like everyone.
yeah, and like Michael Chernak, Olav Shalom, used to always say, he always used to repeat this famous vart, that even on Yom Kippur, at Mincha, just before you're about to pray Ne'ilah, what's the section of the Torah you read? You read about the Arayos, you read about the forbidden relationships. To remind you, even in your holy estate, remember what you're capable of. And when you're faced with those challenges, that's when it counts. Michael Chernak used to quote that a lot. Yeah. Oh. Yeah. My father actually always says that, right, he's making reference to the Gemara, which says that just like the 15th of Av, where women used to dance to attract shidduchim, so they would on Yom Kippur. So my father always says, on Yom Kippur, that's what you're thinking about, your shidduchim. So my father says, it's to teach you what a shidduch is about. If you're looking for a soulmate, then you should look for it on the most soulful day. Right? If you look for it on a bodily day, you're getting your marriage wrong. It means you're thinking marriage is about the body. Remember, the marriage is about the soul, and therefore on Yom Kippur, that's when you should look for a soulmate. So my father's vart says this a lot. Okay, so let's give it a few more minutes. Let's just quickly. Okay, let's actually stop over here because the Gemara is going to bring in a new text, which is going to lead to another text, and then the final text concluding our tractate. Okay, so God willing, tomorrow we'll finish this tractate, and the day after, we shall go to the section in Shabbos that discusses Hanukkah, and there's I'm not even joking, endless commentary on those pages of the Gemara about Hanukkah. Everybody's got a book on it. I'm being a little facetious, but many scholars have written books on those pages, so we're going to try to share some of it at least give an insight into what they're talking about. We'll share some insights from the Rabbi, which are beautiful and deep, and I think it's a good suggestion, wherever it came from, the judge suggested. Okay, wonderful day, everybody.